Hi, we are lighting the candle, a world that works, and I am Bill Carell. I'm here with three of my best buds in the world, Ken Caputo, Lisa Sheehan, and also Jan Jeremias. And we get together, seems like about once every week or so, and kind of kick around some ideas in terms of having language create empowerment, both in our bodies and hopefully in your bodies, being our listeners and participants. And we were just talking about um, loss and losing loved ones and how there seems to be a lot of that going on right now. And so I'm inspired to talk about different levels of love today. I'd like to really kind of get in and explore love and all of the other words that are either synonyms or lead us to a greater understanding of love, and not necessarily love and something else, but what's in the domain of love in terms of language and how we can access a feeling in our body that we describe afterwards as having been in the presence of love. And that's the best I can do on short notice. So with that, I'm going to kick it off, and see if there's any thoughts, anyone out there who has anything to say about that, or how it strikes you hearing it, or another topic entirely if you like.
Oh, no. Um, well, because we've spoken on love. I don't know what level we've spoken about it before, but and how the English language is so on. It doesn't. It only has one word for love, where other languages have different words for different types of love. So we're like inadequately provided with language to express our love, and then the other aspect of that is that I've also um, admitted that I am not one that can say that word easily because I hold it in such high regard that I don't pass it off all the time lightly. But it ends up being almost to a troublesome point sometimes that I cannot say it when I really should. So that's my 2 cents for now.
Thank you, Lisa.
What are you thinking, Jan?
Oh gosh. Oh my gosh, Ken, you don't want to know. Um, uh, I probably could share it more easily, and I'm much more apt to tell people I love them. Even if just to me it's this endearing word. So friends, business colleagues that I have a close relationship, I might, end the conversation with love ya. And I think that in my mind, even though it's one word, it definitely has different meanings to me. Like if I said love you to someone, there is a particular connotation for me, and I think they know that if they know me. Whereas someone that I might hold, might have a stronger or long lasting or lifelong relationship with gets the meaning, and it's different because the people that are in the conversation are actually different people.
I like that, and I think that it's an extremely context sensitive word. And the one of the distinctions, in terms of how love is defined, is an intense feeling of deep affection or fondness, tenderness, warmth, intimacy, attachment, and having and feeling a deep affection for someone. And at some level, it's at the top of the pyramid in terms of a positive human emotion that, given the songs that we grew up with and all of the way that the word has been used to market things, and for TV shows and like Love American Style and The Love Boat and all of that. And it really had a lot to do with indicating how you get to a point where you choose another person to be a life mate, or something of that nature, where love necessarily needed to be one of the ingredients in how that worked for people. but I look at it also in terms of, you can say I love you to 40 or 50 different people in the course of a week, and it's true, and it describes what's actually going on, and it has a completely different resonance in the body each time you say it. It's not always plucking the same string.
Now, Bill, you just described it as an emotion. Is that
Yeah, that
you
there's some
feeling it?
kind of, yeah, a felt shift in the body when there's actually love present and you're saying it, I think. As opposed to people who just say it and they just kind of mean it like, you're kind of cool. You know that, like, I love it when you do that sort of thing.
Mhm.
But I like what Jan had to say, that it describes something special between two human beings and doesn't always mean the same thing.
And I'll just go further because it doesn't have to be a human being. It could be, for me, it's, love between me and Tonka, or it could be being an experience outside and having that feeling and your love of nature, which might pluck those same emotional strings depending on how connected you feel to the earth and, your surroundings.
Yeah, an interesting question that might lead into that. What are the sort of things that give you goosebumps? And it's not necessarily going to be people as much as it could be sounds, or it could be music, or a particular kind of art, or maybe a picture of a sunset or sunrise, or the smell of peach blossoms or orange blossoms, in early spring, on a 75-degree day that just kind of wafts across or jasmine or something of that nature. And in many cases, I would say it's not something you vote on. It resonates with something, and it actually affirms, as well as confirms, that there's something very enjoyable about it for
Like I
me.
was thinking of goosebumps because it's also can be like hearing good news. And I think I shared with you all of my cousin who was a heart transplant recipient, um, had twins recently. So when his mother told me, that they were here and they were good, but they're just hearing her say it gave me goosebumps. So I mean that's definitely a level of kind of different kind of love, or another um, definition behind the word love kind of thing. And so I think that gives me goosebumps. It's just another level of it.
Thinking of hearing, or when you read a story of someone or an experience that they've had and it has that same ability, and it's not like it's not like them, like let's say Lisa's story that she was sharing and feeling that emotion, and you don't know Lisa. I mean, I don't know Lisa's family, but still feeling that very strong emotion, and maybe it's not, I don't know. I don't know if it differs dynamically from someone that, depending on how you feel and the depth of your feelings, how, whether it would be different for your family, your own personal family, versus hearing it from someone you know or possibly don't even know.
And it
It
also
sounds
might be something that triggers your own experience of something that Lisa is talking about that's similar.
Hmm.
And you might not even be able to put your finger on what it was, but there's something there that just immediately connects and communicates, I think.
that's human connection. We were my a few friends of mine and I were separately talking about how you know you were going to be friends with somebody, kind of thing. Like what aspect of them got to you to such a level that you immediately liked them and you knew they were going to be in your circle somehow. And it's hard to pinpoint a that level of likeness that turns to friend love, that kind of thing. So I think it's hard to describe all the levels of love and every aspect that there could be. Like Jan said, it's not just human. It could be anything. I've fallen in love with a helium balloon for God's sakes, and I couldn't let it go. It's like the
Now, some would
silliest
say that
thing.
might have been attachment, but I get it. And it's all well and good until the string leaves your fingers and you watch it drift away. A great
Oh,
metaphor
no, it was
for
failing,
other
so I
loves
had to
too.
put it up on a chair.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting, what people that talk about, higher power and God and supreme being and all that sort of thing use words like agape and the whole notion of absolute and absolutely uh, unconstrained, unconditional. A lot of whole lot of uns about you couldn't at some point cause somebody to unlove you no matter what you do on the face of the planet, and that strikes me as kind of like being a really great safety net and a blanket for people who aren't feeling really good about themselves in a particular moment, to know that there's someone, something, or a supreme being out there that basically says you were put on the earth to be human, which basically means if you don't fail, then you probably should be sitting next to me already, that sort of thing. But if you do fail, don't worry about it. You're going to be a worse critic of yourself than I'll ever be, and I'll always love you for it. I think parents can understand that sort of thinking when they're in that moment where they're not quite sure if they do love their children anymore for a half second.
I think I'm ready to take a stab at this.
Give
Just
it a
kind of,
shot.
well, no, I've just been thinking about sort of a little metaphor. So it's just, I think the closest I can come is thinking of love as this. I've probably mentioned this before. It's this just kind of ever present, ever flowing, energetic river that's always there. And our degree of awareness to it and is based on the connections that we're experiencing. So, you can have a connection to the balloon and you just dipped your toes in the river of love. Like it was always there. It was just the connection that kind of determined that. And that sometimes we're drowning in the deep end, sometimes we're getting pummeled by the rapids, sometimes we're just sitting on the bank and we can smell it. It's always there. It's just where we are in relationship to it. And that relationship to it is dictated by the level or strength of the connection we're experiencing. Because I agree with Jan. I mean, I remember my golden would look at me, and if that wasn't love, I don't know what is. And she didn't have to have any highly attuned sense of consciousness. She was connected to me, and I was connected to her, and we were swimming in the river, you know? And that's it. But the river was there, and I could have just as easily had the same dog and not and maintained distance and had some kind of buffer, or not seen her as the beautiful companion that she was to me, and just not have been as close to the river. But the river was always there. It's always present, you know? That's all I got.
Well, it sounds like we're in violent agreement that it has a lot more to do with an experience that you're going through than what else is around you. And there's a presence to some sort of an energy that just more or less gives you a feeling of being alive, and present in this moment. I mean, it seems like at the exclusion of everything else, because mostly when you notice the river of love, you're not really noticing other things. And at the same time, when you're not noticing the ever present river of love, it's because you're full of other things. Or maybe I'm full of it. I don't know.
Well, I just wonder, like, if you're feeling isolated and disconnected, that you've moved away from that river. But the river is always there. It's like in an instant you can find love for someone that you hate. In an instant by simply shifting the connection that's occurring between you. You get some new piece of information that resonates with you, and all of a sudden, the love that was always there just shows up. You become aware of it. It's like some weird background noise that you've just been in the environment long enough that you don't notice it. And then someone walks into the room and says, "What is that noise?" And then you hear it. The noise was always there. It was just your relationship to it that was different, So I don't know. That's why I don't, I always liked that because it just feels like saying that love was lost or, something's incapable of love. It's like, it's just always there. It's just how we're noticing it, and how open we are to it being present, in our experience.
As you're saying that, Ken, I'm thinking it's awareness of love being there. And
Yeah.
it's an awareness, and that when you have, let's say, when you have a being which has never been exposed to love for whatever reason, whether that be abuse or lack of or withdrawal, it's not, it's there if you show them it's there. If
Mhm.
you bring it into their awareness, and that by your presence, and that might be just enough for an animal. It's not necessarily, especially with an animal that's been abused, contact sometimes is not going to happen. Like, they're
Mhm.
not going to let you close, but it's just being and sharing the space with them, and them realizing that you're not a threat, and then breaking down that barrier of like, oh, okay, well, I don't have to be afraid. I can be in the presence of something else or someone else.
It's funny you're saying this, and I keep hearing the word connection over and over again. It's just kind of interesting. It's like, so something is disconnected from love, and you can't make them feel love, but you can move them towards a connection. You can help foster a connection, and then that opens up the circuit, and the more that circuit opens up, the more they get to swim in that river. The river's always there, they're just disconnected from it. So now, isn't that interesting, where instead of focusing on trying to feel or foster love, we just focus on connection, and the love part takes care of itself, maybe. I
Well,
don't
the
know.
interesting thing about it too is language is just it's like an IP address or a telephone number or latitude and longitude. You use a word to describe a location, in understanding that imparts something to somebody else. And there are probably people that can go their entire lifetime without ever hearing the word love spoken in many parts of the world. And yet they have these feelings from time to time that there's no description for,
Hmm.
which I think is marvelous. And Jan, when you were talking about the animal in distress that is not capable of accepting whatever it is that you're giving that's good, that's so true for so many human beings.
Mm-hmm.
There's these days, and with so many people that are medicated and have addiction issues, and all sorts of different things that drove them away from the point of where they were willing to feel anymore. You know, more than anything, that describes most people that have become addicted to something, either a behavior or alcohol or drugs or something of that nature. But generally, they're things that are not necessarily good for them, but it reinforces an idea that they picked up somewhere along the way that they're not worthy and they're not good people.
And I would take it a step further, is the fact
Yeah,
that they're not lovable.
100%.
And that feeling, whatever that be, failed relationship where they based all their whole life on that, and so when that went, they were like, okay, well, I'm not lovable. Or a kid who never hears the word love and never gets any acknowledgement,
Yeah,
because most of the time we go to, I mean, human nature is not to go to the fact that we're great. It's not human nature. Human nature is to go in the opposite direction. Like, if there isn't something there, quote unquote, what's wrong with me? Or what is, that's much more natural for people to go to the negative than go to the positive.
and what a really cool idea. Just for a moment, if the conversation were to just shift the other direction, where everything that was spoken to a child their entire 12 years of going to school before they decide what they want to be when they're an adult, that they were always told every single day, you are the most powerful person in the world in terms of your own life. Every single day. What you get will directly relate to your ability to decide for yourself and then decide to do the hard work that it takes for you to get the most amount of enjoyment out of your day. And also know that you're not going to get satisfaction out of some disconnected thing or drug or alcohol or bad behavior or whatever, that your choice has to do with engaging other human beings in the conversation that you want to manifest. So if we learned how to do that for ourselves, the responsibility for the life that we have and how things go today wouldn't rest out there with someone else where we have no control over it. We might fail at achieving a moment where we actually feel, the feeling that we want to feel on our own. And when we do stay with it, it's like mastering anything at all that requires muscle and requires some kind of skill. Being the master of your own life and being encouraged by all the people around you that don't stop. You're on the right track. Just keep going. No answers here, but you got to go discover this for yourself. And guess what? You're going to find out really great things. This I'm sure, because it worked for me. And what you find is going to be different than what I did. And at the same time, it's a game worth playing. Whether or not it comes from love or it just comes from a commitment to see somebody be successful. What are the conversations we typically hear, though? What is the culture and the community telling us in terms of some people not having the ability to have any control over their own destiny? And what does that have to do with anything associated with love?
I was thinking I'm going to stay with the connection theme because I remember I think it was Tony Robbins saying that we're kind of designed to either move away from pain or towards pleasure. And, so you're going to be doing one of those two things. So if you're moving away from connection or toward connection, then that might, that's one thing to consider. But then the other thing I thought is, what do you associate connection with? Because for some people, connection is associated with pain because they've been hurt. They've trusted and been betrayed, or, they're at that place and where we all have, where we experienced a connection and then that connection was severed by either our own actions or someone else. And now how does that influence love if your relationship with moving toward or away from connection has shifted? That's going to, the symptomatically your recognition of the presence of love is going to be shifted as well.
And,
Like
and the interesting part of that, Ken, the question that comes to my mind is, what's your attention on?
Right. And your attention, like when you're in a place of not drowning, your attention is on not drowning, so it's funny, you can have all of the evolved conversation about what you could do or being empowered or being strong, but you're too busy just not drowning. So that's an interesting thing too, just reflecting on it. I can remember talking to teenagers through the years who I didn't recognize that that's where they're at. So I'm talking about positive mental attitude and all the health, self-help stuff, instead of just saying, what do you need to not drown right now? And not judge that or try to motivate them, or anything else. Just listen and see if I'm capable even of helping them not drown without them taking me down with them, which it's an interesting thing, when you think about that way. I just thinking about working, especially with kids, how often we forget that, the world that we're seeing and the experiences we have, they're unique to us and they may not be relevant to the space that they're occupying in that moment. And maybe that's where it gets so confusing. I just had a conversation with a guy now. He's trying a new diet, and he's sending me all these YouTube channels from the guy who's talking about why this is the diet. And it's interesting because where he's at and for what he needs, this is the thing. And this guy is convinced it's the thing. But from my perspective, I'm like, yeah, I would be miserable if I did what this guy is saying to do. I like wouldn't even want to try it, you know. And my friend was like, well, why wouldn't you even want to try it? And I'm like, because I'm not in a place where that would make sense. I've had experiences that have told me this is not something that I would want to invite in my life. And so then we worked together to find a place where we could be connected because we love each other. And that was the byproduct of finding that connection and agreeing to kind of disagree. So that was very circuitous, but love is circuitous, I guess. So
Well, I love it, and I think the tangent to connection almost always leads you into more or less a memory of your own personal experience. But while you
Mhm.
were speaking, I'm hearing both Maslow's hierarchy of needs and also, Carl Jung and Freud. Basically, what they say when you strip away all the culture and all the training and the refinement, what you have is you have a world full of animals that are either fighting or running away, you know, the fight or flight mentality at the bottom. And when somebody is in that survival mode or has been abused for all of their adult life or all of their childhood, it could be an animal or it could be a human being, or it could be a whole bunch of both. And when it finally comes down to is that in order for something powerful to happen, um, there has to be an adult in the room, there has to be somebody who kind of steps up and basically says, I get it. This isn't working for anyone, but what's the next thing that we can do that that you can pull off and you can make happen? And that's where you start to get that connection, where there's a hand that comes out and you might get bit. You might pull back a hand with teeth marks in it or something of that nature. But I'm saying that there has to be an opportunity for the notion of connection to be present, for to even begin that journey to where would love be experienced in many human beings lives, and especially so in the addiction circles.
Well, as I was listening to Ken and he was talking about, being able to realize, let's say, that he could never do it, that this was, looking at just being able to be in a space with someone and kind of say, okay, well, this is not for me, but this is what they want. And being in that situation now and being able to sort of separate yourself enough to realize that this is not your life and not your experience. Like they're going through this, but be able to see, and as much as you have the capability of, to be able to truly understand what they're going through. And I think that that's where that connection becomes apparent, because you have that ability to sit there and say, yeah, I could make that decision, but it's not my life. It's not my experience. I mean, I'm going through that with my mom right now, with the different situations that we are. I know what I want, but it's also, I mean, she's a thinking person and a feeling person. And I can't, you know, she has to decide what she wants. And I'll try to be here for her for that. Yes, it might it not be what I want? Absolutely. But I have to be willing to go there and say, okay, well, it's not necessarily what I want, but it's right for her.
It was interesting too, as you're saying that in this circumstance, he values my opinion. So my resistance to it concerned him. So now, I had to make sure that I was being clear on my personal preferences while at the same time acknowledging that this could be of value for him,
Mhm.
and then just exploring, like, we were looking for the commonalities, and then just it became an experiment, and it became something where our main interest was in supporting each other through our experiences. Not But it would have been really easy for us to have a disconnect there, where I'm saying, well, I won't do it, and he's like, well, I'm doing it. And and then you're like, so now there's no opportunity for love to express there. In that circumstance, we can still feel love for each other based on the relationship, but you'd end up with a disconnect. So it's really interesting. I wonder how often that happens, just inadvertently,
all
Right.
the time.
you know, just
Well, I think
not even by meaning to, you know.
Yeah.
Well, I think because people don't necessarily want conflict, and so
Sure.
all of a sudden they come up against someone with a differing opinion or a different thought process, and it's almost like, well, I'm going to take the easy path here, and it's almost easier to say, okay, well, you do what you want, and I'll do what you want, and we'll separate ourselves in this circumstance, depending on your personality and whether you like that. But some people don't want to have that conversation at all.
Well, and many
It's
people are in a different conversation entirely. You
Yeah,
say, "I
yeah,
can't see myself doing that," which he's
right.
basically saying he's hearing, "I hate you, and you're bad and wrong for not
That's right.
doing
Exactly.
things like
yeah,
what I
yeah,
do."
yep.
Okay, so he's hearing different words than you're saying. He's not
Right.
hearing. There is no connection. Though it's a
Right.
language connection where the words are fighting with each other, but the human beings aren't, really taking advantage of the fact that you're in the same room and have this great opportunity to support each other and raise each other up.
Uh, no, it's funny with managers every once in a while, working with different managers, and they'd be like, "It's just common sense," something that one of their team wasn't doing, and I'd always finish that with two more words for you,
Mhm.
common sense for you. And then it always come back, well, how can it not be common sense for them? And I was like, I don't know. That's a good question. And then all of a sudden it shifts to, now it becomes exploratory. Why isn't that common sense for them? I mean, it's funny. I mean, we had a girl who'd never used a vacuum cleaner. She was in her 20s, and you'd get people, how could she never have used a vacuum cleaner? It's like maybe her mom liked to vacuum. Maybe there was never a reason for her to
They had
use one. I
hardwood
mean,
floors and they used a broom.
yeah,
Yeah.
like when I got my first apartment, I had never run a dishwasher. We wash dishes, we didn't use a dishwasher, so I put dish detergent in the dishwasher.
Ooh,
And you guys know what happens then, right? There's soap bubbles everywhere. So I call my mom and she starts cracking up laughing. And she's like, "Yeah, how would you have known? There's special detergent for and it was, and it's you don't know. You,
Well, what I keep kind of getting a glimpse of while we're talking here is, what does love look like to somebody who's never known love? And I guess that's really, where the conversation for possibility keeps pointing back to me, because the four of us are in the top 1% of the 1% in the world in terms of our ability to have gone through experiences, educated ourselves, been educated by other people, have the kinds of failures where it didn't cost us our life, make friends at a high level, and have many people who we can exchange conversations with and be fed in those conversations, such to the point where we are not defending our egos when we're having conversations with each other, as much as we're learning more about ourselves and each other by the new language that we come up with every single week. And most of the rest of the world is they're at a subsistence level. They're like coming across, 1 million people a quarter into the United States, and when they get here, they have the strategies of people who are survivors. They have the strategies of people who will say what they have to say and do what they have to do to get their next meal, to get a roof over their head. And then once those things have been satisfied, they go back to the behaviors that didn't work for them wherever they came from, that they were trying to get away from. So the interesting part for me for all of this is that you can't behave with people as if your instructions mean anything to them at all, even though they nod their head. And I had a really great conversation with a guy last week. We were talking about folks who do what they have to do, to get a pass to go to recovery. You're going in front of the judge, and the next thing you can do is you can go to jail or you can go to recovery. Now, most people choose recovery. And when they do, they go through whatever the minimum level that time is, to get back out with their friends and get high again. And that's kind of a really easy to observe set of behaviors that we would say that's not normal for people. But if you strip it all away and change the subject to somebody who's trying to get from 50 to $100,000 a year in income, or has no friends and they want to at least get one friend, they're going to go through tactics. They're going to find out something that may work for them one time. They're going to keep using it again and again. And the easiest way for them to ever get anything that they want is to let it all get stripped away. And first of all, learn how to be happy and comfortable with who they are authentically without need of applying anything to it at all. And people don't do that in a vacuum, in my experience. So, what kind of a shift in our culture do we need to see to where there's actually a candle being lit? And I got to share this one little thing from you. I copied and on my LinkedIn page, I found this thing, and it was a young man who had these two Bic lighters. He lights one and he lights the other, and there's like a 2.5-inch flame on both of them. So he puts one of the Bic lighters down, he gets a glass, and he puts the second Bic lighter in the bottom of that. And then he fills it up to about halfway of the Bic lighter, and he says, "So here you are. You've had breakdowns in your life. You've lost a loved one. Things are not working out for you." And then the water comes all the way up to the top, the silver part, where the plastic meets the silver, and there's more. And now you've lost your job, you've lost your parents, you've lost your home, and then finally, the water goes over the top of it, and he dumps the water out. He pulls the lighter out, and he goes to light it. Nothing happens. Nothing happens at all. And then he holds and depresses the button where the gas is coming out of it, and he lights the other lighter, and there's a flame there. And the point is that agape, that river, all that is always present. And I say it takes responsibility from someone in the room to decide to ignite that and to make it work, and to presence the river of love to someone who can't see it, who is otherwise blind. There was a guy I used to work with, and he said, "I am a man with vision in a culture of people who are myopic. I can't get them to see what I see." And I said to him, and this might have been one of my first smart ass brilliant things I ever said. What would happen, do you think, if you stopped trying to get them to see what you see, and you spent a moment finding out if their vision looks like myopathy to you? And he said, "Shut up and go sit in the corner, Bill Corral."
If you were more like me, you'd be okay.
That's
100%. That's usually somebody who's is struggling to figure out who they are,
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah.
So, I keep coming back around to here. I love the gas in the, in the Bic lighter, analogy. I think it's really very, very cool to basically say we have that. Every human being has that. It's an impossible, miraculous spark of uniqueness and potentiality. And sometimes it just takes another lit lighter that's somewhere in the vicinity to get it going.
well.
Oh, go ahead, Jan. Sorry.
I was just going to say, if you look at the menorah, the Hanukkah menorah, the candle that's always taller is the candle that's used to light all the other candles. You don't use one that's on the same level. Basically, it's the one that's kind of elevated, and not because it's better, but the whole symbolism is that there's always someone to light the candles of everybody else, and yet its light is never diminished by doing so, because
Perfect.
it can be used to burn. So just as you were talking, that my Jewish roots.
Well,
Yeah.
that's really the coolest part. That's the coolest part. Your light that you used, you've already got that flame.
That's right.
You're not giving up anything to give it away.
Doesn't decrease it. I mean,
Exactly.
so yeah. Sorry, Con. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just thinking as Bill was talking earlier, I mean, you have people at different levels of, let's say, functionality or wakefulness or opportunity or experience or whatever. But I'm not sure that means that they're not also experiencing love. It may just it's just relative to them. So, using the river analogy, I mean, if we all jumped in and it was 65 degrees, we would all have a different interpretation of how warm or cold it was,
Mhm.
based on so many different things, but it's all the same water. All that's changed is our experience of it. And I can just remember like working with inner city kids who were really, really difficult situations, and they absolutely had love. I mean, they had, sometimes it was love of their connection to their fellow gang members, or whatever, or it could even be the love of the feeling that the drug gives them. Yes, long term that's damaging, but it's still it's still connection. So, and it may not be healthy love, but the river doesn't care whether you're fishing in it, swimming in it, or drowning in it. It's just the river. So, so I wonder if maybe that's the starting point. It's, how do you create a healthier relationship with the river over time, but start from where you are? You do experience love. You love the thrill of beating someone up. I knew people in the military. They got into it. They liked the fight. They wanted to hurt someone. And over time that shifted. When they started meeting people that could beat them up. you know? But then all of a sudden, like there was just a change in the way they had that experience, but there was a love of fighting. I had a love of fighting, still do. But I don't love hurting people, never did. It's, so I don't know. So I think it's, again, now you're back to that, there's just not enough words or language. It's a very, you know tangled thing that you can't understand unless you've lived someone else's experiences and have their perspective, I guess.
Yeah, because I
Right.
was thinking, what if the river's muddy? You don't even
Yeah.
you're not sure what that love is supposed to look like.
Yeah.
And what if the river isn't the river? It's who you are inside and your ability to already love yourself.
And that's
You
what I
can't
was thinking.
love anyone else
Yeah.
without having the ultimate confidence that no matter what happens, you're not going to fail. That's the river, in my opinion. It's not out there or over there somewhere. It's the beginning of the connection, in my opinion. You know what I mean? What
Well,
Right.
I
if
guess just to clarify, in my mind, it's, yes, it's an energetic river that's constantly flowing to and through us and all around us. It's always here. Your capacity for self-love exists right now in every single one of us. It's just, are how much resistance have we created to allowing it to flow? So like acupuncture, it's all about releasing blockages, so that the system can just do what it was designed to do. So when we create resistance or we have blockages, we just have to dissolve those, and then things will bring us to a natural state, which is to love ourselves and by extension, love whatever we choose to connect to and have that experience. It's just a warm friend waiting for us to remember it's there. There we go. There's the poet in me.
I was thinking too, because we have the luxury, like in our 1% of time to think about these things too.
Hmm.
And so we're more deeply invested in just now at some point to discovering that river within us kind of thing, because it did go away and we don't know how it got lost, because we know it's there. And now we get the time to look at it and to maybe not even realize that other people don't even have that access to the river. Or self-love is a hard thing to for many people to do it, and only because we've been taking so much time to cover over that river and not be able to
Y-
see it.
the other thing, Lisa, that's interesting as you're saying that, it's remembering that all we really need to do is model it. And like, I'm doing these outreach programs for various like grade school kids right now. I've got like a cluster of them that I'm doing. And the last one is just sharing and just teaching. And there was one fourth grader who came up afterwards and hugged me. And it was just, for whatever reason, just what I shared connected them. And they wanted a connection to me. I had no idea who they were. They just pat them on the back and they go on their way. And it was just me putting all of my work into something I could model that maybe would resonate with someone else without them having done the work. But they could touch it, they could see it, they could feel it within themselves, even if it's briefly. Now, what's that kid going to do moving forwards? Maybe that becomes the catalyst for them to seek out, you know, their own path. I don't know. So,
I
so
think it's
yeah, so we have value just by being who we are, you
yeah,
know?
and I think just as you're talking, Ken, about what you do, um, and I think when I teach a class, I'm allowing each person to experience that for themselves. I mean, we create the
Hmm.
space. I create the space, possibly the safety, the space, but they're moving within themselves, so they get to physically embody that, which I think is the beauty of something so like physical like that, because I think that there's one thing to experience it and feel it, but to actually embody it. So when you move it, I think it's a sensory memory or a sensory experience that is much more profound and dynamic. So they truly get to
Yeah.
embody that self love and hopefully self acceptance. I mean, 'cause it's an amazing experience to watch people have that. And you did it
And
for
maybe that's the doorway. Yeah, like, Bill's guy was kind of a doer. It's like if you do what I'm doing, you'll you'll find your way instead of a beer,
fear, right?
which is I'm just here, I'm just present. And if you resonate with that, well, find your presence, and I can be your guide a little bit, maybe give you some ideas, but it may not work for you the same way it works for me, and that's okay, you know?
I remember one
Yeah.
of the most profound experiences. I remember when I first started practicing, and then I was doing I think I was probably somewhere in my teacher training, and we were talking about, a self practice. So doing your own practice every day, and thinking to myself, like, what do you do? Like, you know, didn't have a tape in front of me. I didn't have a teacher standing in front of me. And they were just like, get on your mat and put on some music and just move and let your body guide you
Yeah.
and take from that, like, the information is there. Like what you need is actually there and what you're wanting is there. You just have to be willing to trust. And that trust is within yourself, like to trust you.
And it's okay to find some guides that can maybe help you
Oh,
find
yeah.
some shortcuts too. It's like, all right, that's great the way you're moving, but let's not throw out your back. Try this,
Right, exactly, 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 exactly. Could you not bend your knee that way? Because I
Yeah.
really don't want you to blow these ligaments at the moment. Like, yeah, absolutely. And I'm not saying it's a substitution, but it was a great way to explore and to begin to learn about myself and my own physicality, my own
Yeah. Yeah.
body, and this experience of like, okay, well, that's good, but that's not good. No matter what anybody tells me, that does not feel right.
Right. And
Unless I
and what a
learn.
cool way to create space. And then you start finding out, and you're there to help support them as they figure out what works for them, what doesn't. And that's what the best guides do. They're just interested in what works for you, not what they think will work for you.
Mhm,
You know, so we call it conversational learning.
exactly.
You know.
Well,
Except that
highlighting accomplishments too. I was thinking, um, like the smallest little thing I was talking to someone recently, and they said they had done recently was actually she was learning yoga to become a teacher training, and she said that was all she did that summer. And I said, "What about the book you just wrote and got published?" She completely just didn't even count that as part of her recent accomplishments. So it's connection and attention and that kind of listening, that can pinpoint to somebody's their accomplishments and their need to almost like be aware, even if somebody else, if they've locked it away, at least somebody else is pointing out that there are accomplishments that are worthy of their notice. I said, we don't know what we know.
Mm.
Once those things happen, you get this knowledge, and until you can, it's the right circumstance where you can express it, which you guys do so well. And there's always circumstances in these conversations where you can express it, but to point out to somebody because of them and because you have some value in your relationship, you can point it out and make them more aware of their own shining glories and accomplishments.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting, Lisa, because as you were saying that I had two coaches and still have them. And when we first started, one of the exercises they had me do was to ask 5 people traits about me. So they had us, so I think I sent it to you, Bill, and I might have sent it to you, And it was just like, so I had to ask people if they were to look at me and think of adjectives to describe me, what they would say, and
Mhm.
write them down and look at them and everything. And it was so interesting because we don't see ourselves how others see us at
Yeah.
all, or a lot of the time. And so all of a sudden, when people come back at you with what they've thought of you, and you're like, really? That's how you see me? Because I
Yeah.
would never have.
Not
It's like when
tarnished
people,
yeah,
not
not
yeah,
tarnished
like
by
when
your
people will
own
tell me, people say you're really calm, and I'm like, you have no idea, none. So it's like sometimes we're not who we don't see ourselves how others see us.
No, it's always tarnished. That river is kind of muddy inside.
Yeah, sometimes, yeah, that's right.
We take on different roles too.
Hmm.
Well, there's really kind of a basis to every human being, and that they are authentically who they are, and every strategy to be what other people want them to be is in argument with the authenticity that they possess, which shows up with no connection and shows up as no love and it shows up as loss of power. However, there's a thought that when authenticity is understood, that authenticity can be shared, and authenticity on both sides, both giving and receiving, is where love comes from. Everything else that's not authentic just gets in the way and blocks, that energy flow. So the distinction between having, childlike capacities and strategies, like most human beings can get by on whatever they learned about what it means to get by the time they were 12 years old. And that's why there's so much dysfunction in the world, because many of those human beings have never learned what it's like to think about other people at all, let alone be authentic about themselves and be willing to laugh at the things that people say that they didn't know, you know? That that core authenticity that basically says, I'm having a reaction to other people's reaction to me, and that's kind of funny, as opposed to what a breakdown. I have no clothes on and they can see it. However, if you had no clothes on and they could all see it, that wouldn't even be worth talking about. So the whole notion of the strategies and the how to handle and the thoughts that are taking you away from this moment and being present, those are the strategies that we get taught. And when we have an opportunity to reveal authenticity to other people about themselves, so they get them to take a look at it, it's quite remarkable what can come after that in terms of team building and relationship and connection. And you know suddenly a lot of conversation goes into it's about things and not about people. You can tell dramatically, in a group of people, by what they're talking about, whether or not these are folks that are telling themselves the truth. And that's just a refreshing way to get along with folks, where everybody starts off with the notion, I know I'm full of shit, but let's go. Let's see what we can make out of that. But I absolutely love all of the other things that you can do after we teach people they're already okay. There's nothing to do, nothing to change. You're just plain perfect the way that you are right now. Keep questioning yourself. That's what we all do. No, as Jan said, yeah, you look like you're so calm up there. Yeah, I'm ready to go throw up now. Thank you. But see, that's the thing, is that being willing to also be inspiration to other people as part of your authenticity, without poo-pooing, what they saw in terms of greatness in you, where you can just accept it and reflect back to them. Yes, is that something that's useful for you? Then by all means use it.
And I'm thinking maybe the word authentic is kind of what connects people. Like the feeling I was trying to figure out what makes a friend like a friend, what makes it stand out to you. And maybe authenticity is part of it for at least if you have mutual authenticity or something like that, I
One
could
of my
tell.
old one, Lisa, one of my oldest and dearest friends, the first thing that he said to me that cracked me up in college, he said, "Bill, you can't bullshit a bullshitter."
Yep.
And the other thing was in the movie Tucker, where what was his name? Leonard. He's passed now, but he also was in Mission Impossible. But he said to Tucker, he said, "You speak worse than me the same language." And I've always loved that because I think that just kind of like distills it down. We get each other, and
Right.
that's where the friendship comes from now on. Well, I'll tell you what, there's a lot going on in this love business, isn't there? I love
It's
the
a mighty
river.
river.
Yeah, exactly. The connection. There was another metaphor. It was in somebody's sales training class. It was talking about relationship being all there is, and that this Romanian grandmother was talking about how people get together, and she said, when you do something with somebody else and you do it for them without them asking you to do it, then you create this thread. And then when you do it again, it's another thread. And then you get it back from them, there's another thread. And then after a certain amount of time, there's so much thread that there's actually a rope there. And then there's a cable. And that cable you can't cut with nothing. There's nothing in life that will cut that cable. And that's the way you want to behave with people, that you've got that strength in relationship and it's as strong as a cable that they use to hold up a bridge. One thread at a time. Deposits in the trust account.
I was listening to an interview, I think it was with Reese Witherspoon, actually, and she was saying it's all about deposits and withdrawals. If somebody keeps taking, you have to figure that out. And
It breaks your heart when you're overdrawn, doesn't it? NSF. So this is good, this love business. I bet we could talk for days and days. Any kind of closing thoughts or summary thoughts or anything that kind of popped up for you that was maybe a little bit new and different?
About love?
About anything.
I think because one of the things, the class I'm taking is it's 10 weeks and it's all on happiness this 10-week period. The first one is wisdom. This one is happiness. And after that is 10 weeks of love. So I can't wait to get there. But in just regarding happiness, we're all, and not to accept or reject anything that they say, but for the group to agree that happiness was innate, and that ultimately we boiled it down to the fact that you have to be in the present moment in order to really feel anything in from happiness or to love, which I think they kind of like go in direct connection with each other. So there's another connection. But the teacher was talking about his love of chocolate cake, and I said, but you could have chocolate cake your whole life, but all of a sudden, if you're paying attention to it in that present moment, now it brings you to a level of happiness. So you just have to learn to appreciate those things that bring you to that space, and appreciate the people that help get you there.
It's marvelous. The twin sister to love, happiness.
And I think of it as a choice, just like any choice. It's like you can choose to feel it or choose to be in the experience it, or you can choose not.
There's that responsibility thing again.
Yeah, not even, yeah, I guess so. I guess I don't know if I would have looked at it as responsibility, but or maybe just awareness. But it is a choice. It's like those people who constantly complain and constantly find the negative. It's like, and then just realizing, okay, well, you can make a choice. And I'm not saying because life isn't challenging for them, because maybe it is, but there are those people where life really, it's a conscious choice. The consciousness, I guess, is what I'm
Well,
trying to say.
you can be the blender or you can be the frog in the blender. And the other one that I always liked was, chocolate vanilla chews, chocolate vanilla chews, chocolate vanilla chews, chocolate choose. Choose what you got. Don't choose what you don't got. Embrace the moment, let it be just exactly how it is, and see how you do. Ken, any last words?
Yeah, I just always, with these kind of topics, it's like the deeper you go, the more you realize you don't know.
And I also see the value of exploring that the depths of that missing knowledge.
Yeah, yeah.
It's marvelous, especially watching the number of smiles and giggles and laughs and that sort of thing that we pull together in an hour. Well, I guess with all of that said, kind of don't want to go today, but I guess we will. I'm going to choose wrapping this up and bringing it to an end and reminding you that we are lighting the candle, and the world does work. And it especially works if you call somebody and let them know that the world is a better place because they're here. With that said, bye for now, y'all.
Have a good week.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Lighting the Candle, A World That Works, part of the Exvadio Podcast Network. You can catch us each week, as well as the rest of the network, at exvadio.com/podcasts, as well as the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts.